Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tapping into Culture, a show about beer and culture brought to you by VinePair and Sixpoint. I am your host, Cat Wolinski, the senior editor of VinePair, and I am here today with two very special guests. One is Karen Brownell. She is the director of brewing operations at Artisanal Brewing Ventures, and Jen Blair is many things, advanced cicerone. She runs her own business called Under the Jenfluence. Get it?
Yep.
And previously, Jen worked as a education director at a brewery in Atlanta called New Realm. So both of you are great for today's topic, which is breaking down barriers to beer careers. And what I really wanted to focus on today is the education aspect of forging a path to careers in beer, whether it's brewing or otherwise. So why don't we start out just getting a little bit more background info on both of you. So Jen, we can start with you. What is your path into beer, and what is like a day in the life of your work right now?
So I have, sometimes I think I have an interesting path into the brewing industry, and I do, but I've met a lot of other people who are also former attorneys who went into the beer industry, which is what I did. And, you know, I always had a passion for beer, certainly for drinking it, and also for home brewing, and really wanted to move into the brewing industry. And I didn't think I really wanted to be a brewer or a salesperson, and those were the two main jobs that I was seeing. So I started pursuing certifications like the Cicerone certifications and BJCP certifications as a way to kind of demonstrate my willingness to do the work and also my knowledge to get into the industry. And I know we'll talk about it more in a few moments, but really the main thing I'm doing now is a virtual beer judge training for aimed at getting more women at the judging table. It's not open solely to women, but that's where the focus is, because as a beer judge, I'm frequently the only woman at the table. And, you know, knowing that that is something that is accessible to women is something that I'm privileged to know that a lot of women don't know. And so offering this training is a way to say, like, this is absolutely something you can do that is available to you.
Wow. I have a follow-up on that one, but
okay.
Karen, why don't you tell us about your background as well?
Well, so by trade, I'm a chemical engineer out of Georgia Tech, and I grew up in the Anheuser-Busch system right out of college, and actually I interned for them, which is how I really got my foot in the door there. So I was trained in brewing through their brewing schools, packaging schools, rice school, malt school. So you got a touch of everything. And you were, rigorously trained as a supervisor and coached and mentored. Fortunately, I was coached and mentored by some of the best brewmasters in their system. So I felt very lucky to be where I was at the time to learn from the brewmasters that I did. And that's how it worked at the AB system. You just ended up kind of working your way up in through brewing. And after my career at AB, I spent, some time in dairy, and then some time with the Lion Brewery in Wilkes-Barre, where I just, started running a brewing department on my own. And from there, that led me here to Victory Brewing Company and Sixpoint Brewing Company under Artisanal Brewing Ventures, where I kind of feel like I landed at the right place at the right time. And, I guess I would echo what Jen says too, that I run into a lot of people who are women who are just like, how did you get into that? And I think that the path is not very clear for how women get into this industry. It's not clear when people are recruiting, if the right people are recruiting. I actually have brought more women into this industry recruiting at colleges myself for other companies, just because, even when they walk up to a place like Budweiser, the brewers aren't always from the brewing department.
Right.
They'll work in HR and marketing and sales. So the path to this job is not clear, and I would agree on that. But I think we could do a lot better.
Yeah, what are some of the ways that you think that can be clearer? I feel like that's the question that every woman in the industry gets, is like, how did you end up there? Or what got you into beer? And it's like, I think a lot of people don't think of beer as a career opportunity. When your dream is to go to college and graduate and get XYZ job, like it's
right.
something that you maybe don't think of right away as a business. Like even myself covering beer as a business, as a journalist, it was like, it took me a while to figure out that my hobby could also become my profession, in terms of, studying and reporting on the beer industry and the business and everything that goes on.
Well, I mean, I think that, brewers could also, again, I've found more opportunities for women to come up and grow, whether they be food science majors or engineers, because I still look for engineers like myself. I think we're very valuable in the industry, because even if you've grown up in brewing or food science, there's not a lot of, engineering brings another aspect. So I've tried to diversify my team in that way, looking for different educations and backgrounds to come into the brewing industry, knowing that we can be taught just like I was taught, that you can get a certification on the way. You don't always have to have a certification to get in the door. And I think that's the biggest problem, is if you've already gone to school to be a lawyer or an engineer or, a financial advisor, right? You don't necessarily have the means, number one, to put yourself back through a school. And number two, you've already done school. So now it's time to work. So I think that's what deters a lot of people from being able to get into the industry, is that, we even offer opportunities where we've had some brewers come through this facility who were trained as chemical engineers, but started as assistant brewers and worked their way to brewer within a year. So they have a career path here. And I think that, showing that path, that you can be trained on the job and offer continuing education as an employer is key to getting people who didn't just go through school for this to come into this.
Right. And from your side of things, Jen?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Karen said. I think that one thing that's really important for breweries to acknowledge is that men often have a presumed assumption of skills that women are not afforded. And so making sure, like Karen said, that you have those programs in place and that they are visible to people and they know that, yes, you can come into this industry and we will be able to train you. But then also making sure that your employees are aware that, yes, you can come into this industry and we will train them is very important. That getting more women into the industry doesn't stop when they're hired. And that, there's the saying that access without support is an opportunity. And so I think that for a lot of businesses, they will point to something and say, well, yes, we've got this, you're fine. And that's it. When that's really not the case. So I think having those programs in place and making sure everybody understands how they operate is so important. And another thing that I will say also with what Karen had said about not necessarily needing to have, you don't have to have gone to a brewing school. One of the things that I, particularly when I'm talking to women, but really anybody who's looking to move into the brewing industry is, first of all, just take some time to write down what it is exactly you think you would like to do, because like Karen said, not everybody's a brewer. And a lot of times it doesn't occur to people that breweries need accountants, they need microbiologists, they need all these different things that aren't just brewers.
Yeah.
And so thinking about where you would fit with the skills you have and where you would like to grow, spending some time thinking about that is the best way to help you recognize those opportunities when they come along, as well as recognizing opportunities to network, within these communities to say, hey, I'm interested in this. I actually had a woman a few months ago who I think she had an international business degree, but wanted to be in the QA side of brewing and reached out. And I just sent a couple of email intros for her to different breweries and malt houses to say, hey, this isn't a ploy to get in the door and get an interview. She's really just wanting to know what it is you look for and what skills she needs to go out and get. So building that network, I think, is very important as well. And the last thing I will say about that, one thing that I really, really emphasize when I'm talking to people wanting to get into the brewing industry is to consider switching their resumes to skills-based resumes rather than chronological, because again, like Karen said, you can have a ton of skills that translate, but maybe you haven't had brewer as a title, but you've had, a machinist job or a janitorial job, something like all of those things have overlapping skills. So look to see what skills you already have that you can bring into the industry.
Right. That's a great point, and something I was thinking about as you were speaking, because there's the technical skills and there's, having an engineering degree is one path and a great one. But there's also technical skills that you have from other jobs, like you say. There's also soft skills, like, are you someone who's going to be able to learn quickly on the job and become a salesperson? Or can you be a tap room manager? Like, there are so many ways to use your own skill set as you also develop it. But one thing I wanted to ask that has been a big question on my mind and on a lot of others, I think, is the difference between the different certifications, such as BJCP and Cicerone, and what the value is in pursuing one versus the other, where each one of those can take you, and in addition to that, kind of the barriers to entry and some of the ways that you personally are helping more women get into that.
Sure. So the difference between, the BJCP certification, that stands for Beer Judge Certification Program. And when somebody asks me, which one should I do? What's the difference between the two? The Cicerone certification program is very much the beer industry standard for an all-around beer professional. You have to demonstrate knowledge of keeping and serving, draft systems, beer styles, brewing, ingredients, food and beer. So as you go up, more about different subjects, but it's more of a like a lateral skill set that you're gaining, where something like BJCP is focused very much on beer styles and on beer flavor and evaluation. So instead of knowing kind of this about a lot of things, this about a couple of subjects within beer. So when somebody asks which one would be, which one is right, anytime somebody tells me they're going through the Cicerone certification program, 100% of the time I say, start doing BJCP, get involved in beer judging, because it is absolutely the best training for your palate, hands down. There's nothing else that compares to it. And it also makes you a more well-rounded beer professional, right? You can be a beer professional, a good beer professional outside of the Cicerone program. The Cicerone is a very good shorthand for telling people what your skill set is. And, between the two, if somebody's interested in BJCP, I really rarely tell them to also go through the Cicerone certification program unless their goal is to advance somewhere within the brewing industry. So one of the differences between the two of them is that the BJCP, moving up through the judging ranks, taking the exams, is substantially less expensive. So something like the online exam for BJCP is $10. For the Cicerone, the certified beer server exam, I think that's $60 or $70. You're achieving very different goals with both of them. So that's definitely not any commentary on the cost value with it. But the most expensive exam you would take with the BJCP is $40. Whereas, myself, I'm getting ready to take the Master Cicerone exam later this year. That's almost $1,000. So there's a huge access issue as well with that. So I think with the most common barriers with Cicerone, I really would say the cost. Again, going back to that accessibility, I think a lot of people don't realize, like Karen said, that you can learn a lot of these skills. You can learn so much of this knowledge And so the accessibility and the cost with BJCP, it's a completely volunteer run organization. So you run more into availability for things like exams and, kind of a slow moving machine when you're wanting to move through this system. So I think that's a somewhat brief synopsis of your questions.
Yeah, no, that's actually a different side of it that I hadn't really thought of or considered before. And the basis of BJCP being volunteer based, I know that when I've looked into it, it's like when you are taking exams or looking for tasting instruction, those things are kind of happening all around in different cities. And Cicerone, on the other hand, is a private organization, and it's based only in Chicago. I mean, now things are different because of the pandemic, but previously you could only take the exam in Chicago. So they're definitely different in that respect. I'm curious, Karen, as someone who is at the head of multiple breweries, are either of these certifications something that you look for when you are recruiting at colleges, or is it like, are there a lot of certified brewers and other employees on staff?
So we have brewers that have gone through a lengthy brewing school. We have brewers who have gone through some Cicerone training. We are looking at offering, assistance to our current employees, both in brewing and in the lab, to get Cicerone training. I'm interested to research BJCP, because it's something I'm not as familiar with, but it sounds like something that's kind of a quick win based on what Jen has told us that, we could use to engage some of our employees as well. So do I look for specific certifications when hiring people? No. I look for, like Jen said, skill sets, life skills, what their previous education and training is, and what their desires are. I mean, one of the brewers that I hired here recently is a person who was a project manager for like a lighting company, right? And just after COVID hit, and I think that changed. I think COVID changed a lot for people and what they wanted to do in their careers and how serious they wanted to be about work and life, and things just got reprioritized. And he decided that he wanted to quit his job as a project manager because his dream was to always work in a big brewery and, learn how to be a brewer from scratch. And I'm like, I will take that all day long, and I do find myself looking for, people who haven't been just typical brewers. So, I'm extremely open knowing my background and where I came from. And I think even when I started here, I felt like we limited ourselves in a bit in our criteria for searching for candidates by requiring some of those things. But we've really kind of relaxed what we're looking for and helped our HR department with its screening features so that we funnel in the kinds of candidates we're looking for with those kinds of skill sets. And I think that's been a big problem in the brewing industry overall. I mean, I even in my previous job, even though I was the director of brewing, I kept getting asked to go get a certification somewhere. And I was just like, why? I've been through these kind of classes internally, and I don't have a piece of paper except for a Budweiser brewing school that says I've had this kind of training, but I'm already doing the job. So why do I need a certificate? I think they're great to have. And I think education of any kind is great, and continuing education is great, because when you're a brewer, you still don't know everything. But I also find, as I'm going around, when I was at Craft Brewers Conference 2 years ago, I think Nashville was 2 years ago. It could have been 3. Time has also kind of stopped for me a little bit during COVID. But like, even there are some schools like Auburn University offering satellite 15-hour courses on basic brewing school. I mean, it can be a little pricey to take a 15-hour course, but if you're close by, or even if you're far away and you can meet some of those requirements, I'm seeing more of those kind of schools pop up as well, where you can take some courses online, do some training, and there are different ranges of investment so that it's become a little bit more affordable and realistic to people. And I keep trying to research those for myself, for some of my employees, our microbiologists, like you said, because I think those are really important. It's not only important to run the data, it's important to be able to interpret it. So
Right.
there's a bunch of stuff popping up out there. For the real question is too, how do we reach out to people and let them know, not just women, that, you know, you don't have to just be what has been a typical brewer to be a beer brewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that we've seen starting to happen throughout COVID, through the pandemic and online. And one of the, I guess, positive sides of all of this has been a lot of people coming together and forming groups. Like Jen, we actually got in contact because of the Road to 100 that Black Beer Chick started. And that's something that made me realize, you know, like from, like you said, Karen, there's a lot of people who already work in the industry. They're already experts. And for them, it's like, why would I need that? I'm already doing it. I'm already here. But then I think seeing so many people interested in those programs that came up, like Eugenia's, was eye-opening for me, in that a lot of people are afraid to take that leap, or they think they don't know where to join, or they don't know where to get the funding for it. And these are really great ways to just start to learn and become more familiar with the subject matter.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I know with Eugenia's program, also with the beer judging program I'm doing, I think people within the brewing industry, and particularly if you're the person who has always been represented, everything's been for you, you underestimate how meaningful it is to tell somebody, you're welcome here. We would love to have you here. Would you like to learn this? I think a lot of times people fall into the trap of, well, nobody's asking me, so that must mean that they're not interested. And that's absolutely not the case. You know, it's kind of decentering yourself from that and recognizing that there are people who truly don't know if they're welcome. And, you know, in some cases don't know if it's a safe environment for them. And there are people who move through the world like that every day, everywhere they go. And when you're not used to that, you've never had to live that, it's easy to forget. It doesn't make you a bad person or an inconsiderate person, but somebody like Eugenia saying, hey, you know, one of the ways we can break down barriers is helping women, particularly women of color, get their certified beer server. And, you know, she had a huge response to that. People said, yes, whatever it takes. I mean, so much so that, you know, it just grew so quickly beyond even what she was imagining. And I know personally with my beer judging program, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I thought maybe 40 or 50 women would sign up. And I haven't checked recently, but at the last time I checked, I had over 650.
Wow.
And, you know, like 200 of them signed up within less than 8 hours. And it was the same kind of thing. I was expecting maybe 50 if I was lucky. And then so many women, it grew, around the world, and people reaching out and saying, hey, we can translate your, like, all of the materials into Spanish, and we can do this. And but that's all it took, was somebody saying, would you like to learn this? Would you like to learn this, you know, from not me specifically, but would you like to learn this from somebody who has a worldview much more similar to yours? And, you know, and then it's just talking about other barriers that exist beyond that. But we've already taken that first step of, we're all, you know, arm in arm learning this together, and also just making the beer world better, because there's going to be more voices in it, and more voices that haven't been heard before.
Right.
Yeah. And to back on what Jen's saying, you know, I think it's scarier to learn when you know that there are people in the group that aren't a lot like you. I think that being more open as a company, being more open as an industry to diversified backgrounds makes it so that people are more comfortable and want to join. I mean, if you look at the demographics of the brewing industry, and greater than 70% is not a diverse category, or what is considered a diverse category. If people want to also sometimes just be with people who are like them too, even if they're a little bit, you know, if they're different, you know, it's hard and sometimes intimidating, I think, or I found that, as a woman to go into an industry that, you know, there are a few people who are just like me in a position that I'm in. I've just kind of never personally been afraid of that, but I know there are a lot of people are, and that's why we don't always attract people who are different.
Right. Yeah, it's really a moment of, acknowledging your own comfort and privilege, and like, I'm sure all of us have experienced, the three of us at least, what it is being a woman in the beer industry. And there's a lot of talk about that recently. And that's just one perspective, or one part of a perspective. Then there's just so many other marginalized folks, whether it's, Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, the LGBTQ community. And then there's the intersection of all of these. And it's such a huge, it can be overwhelming, I think, for people to think, well, like, I'm not sexist, I'm not racist, I'm not, a bigot. But then realizing that just being here isn't enough. It's also like reaching out and bringing more people that are, in your network or in your community into this landscape.
Absolutely. And it's definitely another important thing to remember is that it's not enough to say it. You have to show people that, show them through your actions, and understand that we've been down this road before, right? This isn't anything new that's happening in this industry or any other industry. And is it everybody's paying attention to it now, and then all the promises and all the initiatives just gradually fade away? It's understanding that when you come back and say, no, but this time we really mean it, that people are going to be hesitant. And that doesn't mean that you should stop pushing and stop doing those initiatives. It means that you're going to have to win some hearts and minds.
Right. It's not easy.
Right.
Like, it's going to be awkward and it's going to be difficult, but you got to keep doing these things.
Exactly.
That brings me back to my original question I was going to come back to with you, Jen, when you said that at the literal table in a judging competition, that you're one of so few women. It's not even, I guess I'm so used to my peers and colleagues who are, in this industry. I hadn't even thought that could be the case, that you're the only woman at the judging table. Like, why do you think that is? And how do you think more competitions, or, how the BJCP itself can start to really make sure that these environments aren't so homogenized?
I think the first step is, and this is not, I'm not trying to center this on me, but the first step is telling women that it's accessible to them, and making sure, I think there's a presumption, again, what is it, like, men will apply for a job if they think they're 60% qualified. Women won't apply until they think they're 100%. And I've spoken with so many women who have said, well, I don't know anything about beer, or I've never done this before. I'm not an expert in any one beer style. And not just women. I've spoken with plenty of men who have said that before. And I just think if you have seen some of the people I've sat down across the table from who assumed they were the head judge or they were the authority because they were the man at the table. Like, I can tell you that is not the case. And I can also tell you that I've judged with people, who this is their first time. And one of the good things about the BJCP when it comes to things like competitions is you will always, as a new judge, you will always be paired with an experienced judge. And if you have a good experienced judge, they will walk you through the process. They will help you fill out the score sheets. They will talk you through it. That doesn't happen all the time. And I know of two different women who their first judging experience was so terrible that when it was over, they said, I will never do that again. And that happens a lot. Thankfully, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but that's one of the things behind creating this community of women who are trained to be beer judges also, is when you have an experience like that, you have a group that you can go back to and share it, and they can say, like, this wasn't an isolated incident. You are not alone. Keep going.
Right.
I think when it comes to particularly homebrew competitions, again, this is a completely volunteer organization. When competitions are being organized, they're generally being organized by homebrew clubs. Homebrewers, again, are majority men, and they're looking within their homebrew club and recruiting from their homebrew club. And then if they need to, they're reaching out to their friends, that sort of thing. So it's not something that is intentionally exclusionary, but in practice it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just one of those, you have to create that awareness that there are women out there who are just as interested, who are coming in with just a small experience as a lot of men come into it. And it's supposed to be fun and it's supposed to be educational. But again, for many women, or really anybody who is underrepresented in any kind of group or industry, you're not given as many chances to fail or to mess up or to be unsure. You're expected to come in really having to work harder than people who are more represented in there. So I think it's, as more women, as more, underrepresented, marginalized people are coming into the industry, which we're seeing happen, and, is continuing to happen and continuing to grow, naturally, hopefully, that will also translate into more people understanding that there are opportunities like beer judge training out there for them. And then those networks just get wider, and the pool from which you can invite judges just gets bigger.
Mhm. I think too, Kat, this is a problem, I found for myself as young in my career. When I was in my 20s and working, I wasn't my vocal advocate for my career development. I just thought, hey, if I do a good job and somebody will notice that I'm doing a good job, and I'll automatically get the job I want. And I learned very quickly that if I'm not my own personal advocate, if you don't ask for what you want, the answer is always no.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's one thing we do as women is we tend to, unless we've learned this lesson, we tend to be passive. We tend to be good. We tend to, do the job, try to do it better, try to do it smarter, but aren't really our own career advocates. So,
Right.
Until you're afraid of changing, you're not going to. And for young women that I bring in under my organization, and I mean, I even tell it to the men too, if you don't ask for what you want and tell your manager, your organization, the direction you want to go in and how you think you need to get there, or what do you need to do to get there and be better, it's not just going to happen. People can't read your thoughts, and they don't know your desires to, further your career.
Right. They're not looking out for you the way that you can look out for you.
Right. And that's one of the things I've been, glad to learn and it's worked to my advantage later in my career. But boy, you kind of say, I wish I would knew this in my 20s. What could I have done with that?
Yeah.
But, I feel like if I can pass that knowledge on to people that work for me, or women that I meet, or women that I know in the industry, I've seen a lot of people take that advice and grow and get stronger and go get that position that they wanted. So.
Yes, that's amazing. And a big part of it is having a leader to look up to, like
Mm-hmm.
you, Karen, or you, Jen, having that mentor, or even just that example of someone who is, not in the boys club or in the inner circle in an organization, to be able to not just do the work, but then be confident and assert yourself and ask for a raise. That's what I tell everyone, every freelance writer, anyone I know. It's just like, always ask for more. You probably deserve it. And the worst that can happen is they say no.
Right, exactly. I think that's the important thing when, particularly like Karen said, speaking with women in the industry or really in any industry, and them saying, "I wish I could do this," or "I wish I would get this," and saying, "Then ask for it." And if you're told no, you still have an answer, and you can still move forward from what that answer means for you, whether it's in your position or in your company.
Right.
You've asked, and now you know, and you can decide what to do after that. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, if you ask for something like a raise, you're probably not going to have a room full of people like pointing their fingers and laughing at you or saying something like that. It's going to be something that you'll be able to process and get through. It won't be the worst thing that's ever happened to you. It's scary, and it's it can be nerve inducing, but it's, at the end of the day, nobody, like, you're not going to get heckled for it. So you can just move on and just move forward from whatever that decision is, but you asked, and that's the most important thing. And the more you practice asking for things for yourself and advocating for yourself, the easier it gets.
Yes. It doesn't have to be that big. It can
Right.
be, you want an extra shift in the test
Exactly.
room. It can be so many things.
Yes, exactly.
For me, I wish I had said a long time ago, my ultimate goal is to be this. I kept getting asked the question, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I'm like, I don't know, just doing good, happy with my job. It was like, looking back on it, it's probably the most passive answer I could have get. I look at myself back then now, I'm like, good grief, So, but I found, that later in my career, I was like, well, I do think I'm qualified for this position. I do want this position, and here's why.
Right.
Don't be afraid to state what you think your weaknesses might be, but how you would close that gap. How do you want to close that gap? How can you? It's really about making sure whoever's hiring you or promoting you is just utterly confident with how confident you are you can do this job.
Yes. Right.
Because everybody else, what we don't realize is everybody else going for this position is just as scared as we are.
Yes, exactly.
They don't maybe admit it, but everyone is just as scared of that new job as you are.
That's true. And, it's not only wanting or asking for the thing, it's also proving,
why you deserve it.
Showing your cards. Yeah. Like this is why I deserve it. And if the answer is no, then it's okay. What can I do to get to that point?
Exactly.
And then,
what do I do to make that gap? Because even though the answer is no, for me, it's no right now.
Exactly.
Not no forever.
Yes.
I love that, Karen. I'm going to make that like a motto or something. It's not no right now, or it's not no forever. It's no right now.
It might be no right now, but it's not no forever.
I love that.
That is awesome. I feel like we have a lot of good things to like print out motivational quotes after this conversation. But really, thank you so much, both of you, Karen and Jen. This has been a really interesting career conversation. I hope that anyone who listens can get enough out of it as I just have, even in these few minutes. So lastly, before we finish up our conversation, where can people find you? Karen, if people are interested in working at the brewery or in beer, where should they go? And then Jen, where can we find Under the Jenfluence and everything you're doing?
Well, I do have a LinkedIn profile, and I headline as the Director of Brewery Operations for Victory Brewing Company. I have a lot of people message me that way. And then, of course, for Victory Brewing Company in general, we do have and for Sixpoint, Victory and Sixpoint, we do have our website with career opportunities available. There are postings all the time. And really
great.
all the way from assistant brewer to brewing supervisor to brewery managers. There's constant opportunity here because, the brewing industry is so fluid. Nothing ever really stays the same. So I'm glad to meet you all too here, and I hope that we can keep in touch because this is really great dialogue. I was really excited to hear about BJCP as well as Cicerone because, again, like you described, Cicerone is kind of wide and not exactly totally focused, and you have to go through multi-layers, and it's good and it's a well-known process. But for people wanting to get something really quick, I'd like to look at BJCP a little bit more.
Definitely. So you can actually, Karen, you can learn more about particularly the BJCP training program I'm doing at my website. It's underthegenfluence.beer. And we just actually started our 14-week training. It's virtual, it's free. We are starting on week 3 tonight, but everything is recorded, and all of the slides and everything are available. I've created a members area for women going through the beer training on the website. And, it's definitely meant to be evergreen. So people are able to jump in whenever they join. But yes, underthegenfluence.beer. And you can also find me on Instagram at underthegenfluence.beer, and LinkedIn. I rarely check, but I'm on there. You can find me. I'm Jennifer Blair on LinkedIn.
Got it. That sounds great. Thank you so much, both of you. And I'll definitely be checking out the job boards and the virtual program as well. I didn't know it was free. That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that is good to know. So thank you, Jen.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. All right. Well, cheers, ladies.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.